Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches,
urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.
Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, on the Hump Day edition of The Yard. Hope things are well with you wherever you are today. It's been a lot going on, for sure. It's hard to believe it, but man, college football season is nearly over, at least the regular season. You know, bowl season's fun. You know, I'm a big proponent of fun. People say, oh, there's too many bowl games. Get off my lawn, right? I mean, come on. Never too much college football. So excited about that. The reality of it is we got two big games left for Mississippi State starting this weekend. Of course, a game that everybody's expected State to win handily against East Tennessee State. I'm going to familiarize you guys with the Buccaneers today on the show, and we're going to take a look at kind of how the bowl pecking order sits today and what could happen to impact that in the 2 weeks to come. We'll discuss all those things, talk some basketball stuff. Just kind of get you updated on kind of where we are. I've had so many people here as of late that have reached out to me about various topics and things of that nature, and they say how much they love the show. I've been a lot of book signings here as of late, and a lot of people have come up and said, "Hey, Steve, listen, I've got all your books. I listen to the show all the time." So if I didn't say it properly, then thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Thanks for everybody that's bought books here as of late. We have really done well, and if you're looking to buy books, you go to dogpiletobook.com. You can get all my sports books right there. Bloomsville Leander, you can grab it on Amazon, barnesnoble.com, Books A Million. It's out there for you. And I appreciate everybody that has them all. A lot of sports fans, you know what, Steve, I don't really like poetry, but I want to support you, so bought the book for my wife. So I appreciate that. I want to also remind you, too, on the website at dogpiletobook.com, there is a book that I didn't write. It's about the essential elements of turkey hunting. A former MSU professor and a naturalist kind of wrote his memoirs and all things he learned about turkey hunting. So if you have turkey hunters in your family, I'd encourage you to give that book a shot. And unfortunately, the gentleman died, so we can't get you signed copies. We got the books after his passing, sadly, but still trying to help that family sell some books. Not a ton of them, but we'd like to help them sell that. So again, if you've got hunters in your family, maybe consider doing that. It's not just a regular book. It's not just stories, but it's kind of a how-to, and it's kind of a lessons learned thing. So be sure and check all that out. Let's thank our friends at Bulldog Burger Company. I was there yesterday. I had the grilled BLT salad. I didn't get the barbecue ranch, though. I got the regular ranch because I'm from South Mississippi. That's kind of what we do. It's, kind of a rite of passage. If you're from South Mississippi, you got to have ranch dressing on everything. But I enjoyed the salad. I enjoyed being able to get in that back booth and kind of get away and talk a little business. My friend had the spring rolls as an entree. Like, he just ordered that, and he basically did the Mike Nemeth thing. He ordered the spring rolls and some French fries. That was his meal. Rose Bowl's a guy that's, got to watch your carbs a little bit, So I had the BLT salad. It was absolutely fabulous, and once again, I didn't finish it. The portions there are so incredibly generous. That's one of the things I love about going there is I get a quality meal, and I get a very substantial meal. You can't say that everywhere else, but you can at Bulldog Burger Company. 3 great locations to serve you. University Drive here in Start Vegas with that fabulous new patio area. Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, and then Lake Harbor Drive in the Ridge and Flowood area. Be sure and go check them out today. Get that chocolate shake to go. You'll be glad you did. Bulldog Burger Company, the place where people go to meet. M-E-A-T. All right, let's talk about ETSU. Now, Mississippi State has played East Tennessee State one time. That was back in 1998. It's a 53-6 win, if I remember correctly. Of course, that's the year we won the West. Not going to win it this year, but that's the only meeting. And ETSU has only played really a handful of SEC teams. Their lone victory against an SEC foe came last year against Vanderbilt in the debut of Clark Lee as the head football coach at the Vanderbilt Commodores. And so that's their one. I think they're 1-6. I've got my notes right here. I don't know why I'm just sitting here speculating. Yeah, they're 1-6. One, as you hear me turn the page, 1-6 against the SEC teams. And just kind of looking at it real quick here, just so you know, they've played Auburn, Kentucky, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. You'd think that a Division I program in the state of Tennessee would get an opportunity to play more Southeastern Conference teams with greater regularity, but it just hadn't been the case. And they have played football a long time. It's not like they're, an upstart. They've been around for a while. The program is led by Coach George Quarles. He's the 19th football coach in the history of ETSU. Prior to that, he was at Furman for 5 seasons as the associate head coach, and then got the promotion there. And obviously a guy that kind of an offensive guy, had some really good numbers in the SoCon. And before that, he was a very, very successful high school coach. As a matter of fact, he's in the Tennessee High School Sports Hall of Fame. So a Furman grad, too. And that's interesting, too. You get a Furman grad away from their alma mater, and they take a head coaching job. And so, it is what it is, but that's your background on him. But, you kind of run up down these lists here, and you begin to look for players that maybe you've got some type of connection to. And East Tennessee State probably recruits at least North Mississippi. That's what you'd expect. But there's just not a lot of names on here that have been targets of Mississippi State or prospects that, we have extended offers to. And you say, but Steve, we're not recruiting at that same level. You're right about that. But with the transfer portal, when you have guys get processed out, they need to find somewhere to go play. And on the current roster, there are not any players from the state of Mississippi. So no connections in that respect. But it could have been some guys maybe that went in the portal and found their way there that maybe we expressed some interest in or had at camp. But no connections really with that roster. So no names to really look for that you may be somewhat familiar with. It has been a very challenging year for the Bucs. They opened up the year with a 44-7 win over Mars Hill. And then they lose at the Citadel 20-17. Competitive ball game. Furman then gets them 27-14. They beat Robert Morris. It looks like Robert's the only guy that showed up in a 45-3 game in Pittsburgh. They lose to UT Chat, who was currently ranked 10th in the FCS rankings at the time, 24-16. They go on the road and beat the VMI, Virginia Military Institute, 44-21 in Lexington, Virginia. They lose substantially to number 11 Mercer, 55-33. Then they lose to Samford, who was ranked 15th at the time, 55-45. They lose at Wofford, 48-41, and then lose last week on Senior Day, 20-17 to Western Carolina. So they entered the ball game this weekend on a 4-game losing streak. The thing that I look at here is, and yes, it's an FCS team, but they have done a pretty good job putting some points on the board, and with rare exception, have been able to go down and kind of throw the football around and put the ball in the end zone. And again, this is an FCS league, and so you never know, kind of how things are going to show up and kind of break out over the weekend. But competitive in most of these ball games. Had a couple of blowouts, but by and large, they've been in these games. You lose to Citadel by 3. The Furman game obviously was competitive. It's a 2-score game. Lose to UT Chat. That's an 8-point game. 10 points to Samford, a touchdown to Wofford, a field goal to Western Carolina. And so it's not like they're a bad team. They've got a bad record, though. And your record is what you say it is. But 3-7 overall and 1-7 in the league. And away from home, they're 2-3. So, again, not a very good year for these guys. But and Coach Quarles said that in his press conference this week. I transcribed that, and he made a comment. It's been a disappointing year. There's no other way around it. So I admire the honesty there. All right, let's take a look now kind of inside the numbers here, kind of what we can expect. They are outscoring their opponents 316-280. So basically just over a field goal per game, averaging 31.6 points a game, allowing 28. I expect that number to climb this week. They have been somewhat opportunistic with turnovers, 64 points off of turnovers. So that's an important part of this thing for Mississippi State is, you got to take care of the football. They have had some big plays, but they have not always been able to sustain drives. Just 194 first downs. They've allowed 231. So teams are kind of methodically working that. Now, they have ran the football for 1,753 yards. They've allowed 1,521. So averaging 175 per game. But they're a fairly balanced offense, averaging 206 yards a game as through the air. So it's not like, hey, this is a run-first team, it's a pass-first team. They're going to do their part, to kind of make you keep you off balance as best they can. You'd expect that with an offensive-minded coach, to try to hit you with some wrinkles maybe perhaps you hadn't seen. But 162 completions on 303 attempts, 12 interceptions. That's a pretty big number there. 12 interceptions, just 15 touchdowns through the air. So they've been susceptible to the touchdown pass, allowed 20 this year, and allowing just under 270 yards a game. Again, I expect that number to go up. They're being outgained by their opponents 420 yards to 381. And we talk about special teams and things like that. From a return game, not been very good. Kick return average is under 20 yards, but punt return average has been pretty good. It's also right at 20 yards. If we're getting 20 yards of punt return, we feel pretty good about that. They have fumbled the football 12 times, but only given it up 3 of those times. They forced 10 and got 8. They're a team, too, that is somewhat susceptible to the yellow hanky. 55 yards per game and penalties. That's not a huge gaudy number, but it's been a consistent issue with them. Punting, they're averaging 41.9 yards a punt with a net punt average of 38.5. So they're doing a pretty good, decent job of covering down there. Kickoffs are kind of cool too, right? Averaging 60.8 yards. So that means there are some returnable kicks for Tulu Griffin or maybe Simeon Price, right? There should be an opportunity. I don't know how often they're going to kick off, but we should have an opportunity to return the ball because it doesn't look like it's going to consistently make the end zone. They're losing the battle of possession, time of possession too. 29 and 30 for them, 29 minutes, 30 seconds, while their opponent's just over 30 and 30. So not necessarily a ball control offense, but they're hanging in there a little bit. Third down conversions have just been okay, 32%. Fourth down, they're right at 43% there too, 6 of 14. But they have been susceptible themselves on fourth down, and Mike Leach is willing to go for it. Now, as a defense, they're allowing 39% conversions, but 59% on fourth down. As a team, they have had 17 sacks. They've allowed 22. And they have not played an athletic team like Mississippi State yet. So will they be able to protect the passer? Will they be able to get to Will Rogers? I suspect they won't. But again, just kind of something to watch there. 17 sacks means that they are getting a decent amount of pressure there. Field goal attempts are 17 of 22. And they've allowed 14 of 17. They've attempted one onside kick this year. They did not get it. Been pretty good in the red zone, 79%. But the number that jumps out here is the whole thing about sustaining and finishing drives. Just 50% touchdowns. So in 34 attempts in the red zone, just 17 touchdowns scored. So even when they get down there and move between the 20s, they haven't really been able to cash in. They've only missed one extra point this year. They have not played in front of a lot of people. They average 47,000. Still a pretty good number, I guess, when you begin to think about the quality of that league. And I don't even know if that's the average attendance there in the games they played. And let me rephrase that. I read that wrong. That's actually a cumulative number. So, but anyway, this will be the biggest crowd they played in front of this year, and you'd expect that. By the numbers, looking at quarters here, they are very much a first half team. 88 points in the first quarter, and the most points they scored by quarter is the second quarter, 117. In the second half, things tend to fade off, which tells me that they're not very good at making offensive adjustments at the break because they dip down to 57 and then 54 points. So they scored more points in the second than they have the third and fourth quarters combined. Not that we expect to be challenged in the second half, but I think that number is notable. And they've allowed, the most points allowed per quarter for them is the fourth, 99. The fewest, the first, just 51. And again, make of those numbers what you will. We don't expect this to be a fair fight, but it is something to note that this is a team that appears to fade offensively in the second half. Arguably the best player on the team is Jacob Sailors. He is a running back, has played in 10 games. leads the team with rushing without question. 1,264 yards and 15 touchdowns. This is a guy that even in this league has turned some heads. So that's going to be job one, limiting the run and slowing Sailors down, which of course will make them one-dimensional. Bryson Irby has kind of been a complimentary back, but by and large, the guy carrying the mail has been Sailors. Now, Tyler Riddle has had 48 carries, which is the second most on the team. Sailors has 211. They're riding him. He's averaging 126.4 yards a game. And again, I don't expect this to be a real challenge, but you're going to see a guy that may have a pro football future ahead of him on the field. They spread it around a little bit, when it's a secondary guy, but by and large, they're handing the ball to Sailors. Now, Tyler Riddle is your quarterback. Played in 10 games. They actually had kind of a two-quarterback system. Tyler Riddle and Isaiah Wilson both have played in every game. Isaiah Wilson, has played some, but has only attempted 2 passes. But he's 100%. His efficiency is very good, too. And so, I don't know how they're really utilizing him because it doesn't record any rushing statistics, but he is a guy, too, that has played some at receiver. And so it looks like maybe perhaps that he's a guy that they run some halfback passes to or, some double screens. It doesn't look like he's officially listed as a quarterback. He actually is one of their better receivers in addition to this. But they will allow him to throw the football some. But Tyler Riddle is going to take the lion's share of the snaps here. But 146 completions, 268 attempts, 9 picks for him, an efficiency rating of 125.9, completing less than 55% of his passes. For 1,903 yards, 15 touchdowns, a long of 75, just at 190 a game for him. But you look up and down, Barry May's done some things. They've had 4 different players throw passes and only 2 of them are quarterbacks. So it's important to kind of look at that. I guess that's not technically true. I guess Brock Landis is actually a quarterback too. But not huge explosive numbers. And you don't look at this where anything really jumps out outside of Sailors. It's kind of like they're a one-man wrecking crew, and I think a 3-7 record is reflective of that. But Will Huzzie, a guy we talked about that has kind of been involved in a lot of things. He's carried the football, but he is the leading receiver. 41 grabs for him, leads them in just about every statistical category as a receiver. 41 grabs, 531 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaging 53.1 yards a game. Enos Carter has 30 catches, and then Isaiah Wilson, we just spoke about him. He's also a 30-catch guy too. But they've got basically, 3 wide receivers that they depend on. That's Huzzie, Carter, and Wilson. Sailors also has 20 receptions out of the backfield there. And then once you get beyond that, there's nobody that has more than 10 receptions. And so it looks like what we're going to see is basically the same packaging more times than not. They'll bring some guys in occasionally, but on these passing downs, they kind of rely on these same 3 guys. Punt returns are Elijah Huzzie. I'm sure that's relation to Will Huzzie. He is the lead punt returner, 8 returns for 119 yards, averaging 14.9 yards a return. And then a couple other guys have had some big returns for him too, but he is the primary guy. Long of 62. So you got to be careful there. In the way that we've punted here as of late, I don't know that we can outkick the coverage. We got to get that figured out. Now, Elijah Huzzie, too, is a defensive back, leads a team with 5 interceptions and 100 yards in returns and 1 touchdown. Sheldon Arnold is a guy that met with the media earlier this week. Had some quotes from him in our article on Gene's page yesterday. He's had a couple of picks, too. Kick returns, Jacob Sailors leads them in kick returns. So he's kind of a do-all, be-all guy, right? 9 returns, 219 yards. 58 is the long. Tonquez Ball's another guy that's back there with him. He has had 8 returns. But as a team, they've not been significant when it comes to returns. Probably the best return guy, just on the numbers, is Jalen Frierson. But Sailors, arguably their most explosive player, so they're going to give him the most opportunities to touch the football. Total offense here. I guess we'll skip that. It doesn't really matter. The punting stuff, 42 punts this year, 41.9. 14 fair catches, 14 inside the 20, but 7 of 50 plus. So this Trace Kelly guy's got a big leg. Big leg when they need it. I mean, I don't know that I've seen a lot of those this year. Guys have that many punts over 50 yards. They also have had a couple blocked, or they blocked a couple, We mentioned Tyler Keltner earlier. He's the kickoff guy. Yeah, he has had 23 touchbacks on 63 attempts. So basically 1 in 3. So for every one kick that goes into the end zone, you get 2 that are returnable. That's significant too. And again, I don't know how significant it'll be because I don't know how often they're going to kick off. But there is obviously an opportunity for us to set up a big return there. Our defensive numbers here, Chandler Martin leads the team with 99 tackles. Also has 3.5 sacks, which is a team high. 4 breakups, 4 passes defended. Just kind of getting out there doing it all, aren't you, Chandler? We mentioned Elijah Huzzy earlier too, 56 tackles for him. And from there, it drops off. It kind of begins, kind of incrementally going down. Eric Campbell with 53, Sheldon Arnold with 47. You kind of get the gist there. Martin is the dude. I don't think there's any question about that. When you look at this defense, there's just not a lot of stars on this team on either side of the football. And again, that's reflective, a 3-7 record. You shouldn't have a lot of stars on a team in that respect. If they were playing like stars, well, then it'd be a little different, right? Maybe your record isn't the same. But when you begin to think about, going 3-7, you're not going to have people that just kind of jump off the page at you. And again, we're talking about an FCS team. We're not, we have to respect them as an opponent. But I think the reality of it is all of us can look at this and understand State should win this game considerably. And it really shouldn't be much of a contest. But, we'll give them their just due and we'll run through their numbers like we do everybody else. But I expect State to win this game handily. You all expect to win the game handily. It's 11 a.m. kick. And we did clear up one thing, too. There was a rumor out there that Mike Leach is the one that requested the 11 a.m. kick. And I asked him about that, and he did not. It wasn't him. He says that was shared incorrectly or shared falsely. I think he wanted to play the game at night. But either way, we're going to make good use of that time and begin to prepare for Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl next Thursday. And I think a bigger part of that, too, when you look at that, is no matter how this whole thing plays out, this week we have been able to maybe allocate some guys to watch film and begin to prepare for Ole Miss. Ole Miss may have done that too, but their full focus is on Arkansas. We've got the benefit of the schedule. We kind of mentioned that on Monday too. We've got the benefit of an FCS opponent, and we could probably run base offense and defense and not have to put any opponent-specific blitzes or new wrinkles in. We should be able to out-athlete these guys. But Vanderbilt probably thought the same thing last year and got beat 23-3. I don't expect that to happen to us, but I do like the fact that we do get a little bit of a break in the schedule here late, even though we appear to be kind of trending in the right direction from a health standpoint. Emmanuel Forbes did play last week. He wasn't 100%. He'll be closer to that this week. But I do not expect to see any of the starters in the fourth quarter. And I believe once we get in the second half that we will substitute rather liberally in the third quarter because we don't need to get any difference makers hurt. Get some reps for these younger guys and protect those guys, get their legs back under them before we play a very important ball game on a short week. So that's important to understand too. It's not just about managing this weekend, it's about managing next weekend. And we're going to talk more about the Ole Miss Arkansas game Friday and of course a little bit later in the show as we go through the bowl pecking order. But that's your preview of ETSU. And again, I don't want to waste a lot of time on the show talking about a game that I don't think is going to be competitive. I may feel differently on Monday, but I just don't feel that way today. I think that'd just be a waste of my time and your time to sit here and belabor the point and try to make ETSU seem like a worthy opponent, and they're not. I'm not playing in a game, so I can afford to say that. But you've got a losing FCS team that this year has struggled to put the ball in the end zone. Can't win on field goal, certainly against an SEC team. You just can't. All right, time for today's Top 10 List brought to you by CloseWithBlair.com. CloseWithBlair.com, that's the best place to go when it comes to mortgage lending. Many of you have thought about, maybe it's a time to refinance. Maybe it's time for me to buy a home. Maybe you've been renting for a while. Maybe you've been turned down in the past. Blair is a closer. If anybody can get your loan closed, it's Blair Chandler. Give Blair a call or text today at 601-500-2344. Again, that's 601-500-2344. And mention to Blair you heard about him on the Boneyard. He's going to pay for your appraisal. How about that? Just by listening to this show, you're going to save about $500 right at the gate. There's privileges and benefits to being part of the Boneyard family. Blair's a guy that's been in the industry for a long time, 21 years of experience, top 1% close ratio in the country in back-to-back years. And that's not just in Stone County. That's nationwide. It's a guy that gets things done. And nobody stays in any industry 20-plus years on accident. You got to know what you're doing. And so Blair is a friend of mine. He's a friend of yours. He's your friend in the industry. He will be your advocate with underwriting to get your loan approved. He's not going to waste your time or your money if he didn't think that he can bring your loan to a close. And so be sure and check him out. That should be your first stop. Again, closewithblair.com, C-L-O-S-E with Blair, B-L-A-I-R.com for all your mortgage needs. All right, top 10 today. We're going to change it up a little bit. You guys really like that Lionel Richie list. I think last time I heard from Roy, we had like over 13,000 impressions on that. 13,000 for Lionel Richie? How about that? It's outrageous. Some of you will understand the reference, others you won't. So we're going to dip back into the 80s, and we're going to talk about a pop icon. It's George Michael and Wham. You'd say, but Steve, can you speak intelligently? Guys, I had Make It Big on cassette, all right? George Michael was a talented guy. And I tell you what's interesting, too, and I don't want to get real political, okay? Can you imagine if George Michael today, with the way the media is today, don't you believe maybe he would have had a less tortured career? The poor guy, man, back in the 80s, we had the AIDS epidemic and everything else, and there were so many people out there that, oh, is he gay? Is he gay? Not that it should have mattered, right? And today it would matter a lot less, but there were a lot of people that, they basically boycotted his music, and there was all kind of stuff behind that because of what they perceived to be his, his sexual preference, or, and I hate to use that language. I don't mean to use that in a way that's not current with the times. I'm just trying to say that, I was a huge Freddie Mercury fan. I still am. I don't care who Freddie slept with. I don't care who George Michael slept with. It's not my business, right? But I enjoyed his music. Many of you did as well. And I think there were a lot of people that were so conflicted, because this handsome guy had all these women hanging over him. But be that as it may, his personal life was his personal life. And the way that it all spilled out in the tabloids, nowadays, today, like if you made an allegation like that, I think this person is gay, man, you'd be run out of the industry. It's like, hey, where are we? This 1950s or whatever, And so I just shared that because I think in many respects that a lot of the things that happened later in George's life were kind of maybe a bit of a product of him being persecuted. It's just wrong. Honestly, and I don't know your feelings or your religious beliefs, and I'm not going to challenge that, but, to go after somebody over something so personal like that, he's just trying to be a performer, and all of a sudden, everywhere he turns, he has to answer all these questions about his personal life. And I know that's life in the big lights, but the reality of it is I think that one of the reasons that he died so prematurely is because of this constant persecution. Yes, he made some mistakes, but I think the stress and anxiety of all of that, the weight of all of that, I think really had something to do with his addiction issues and certainly his untimely death. So let's celebrate the music of George Michael today. And again, this is a mixture of some Wham songs and some George solo songs. Of course, Andrew Ridgeley was the other half of Wham, the guy that just kind of got up there and danced around with the guitar and helped do the songwriting. He was not the same strong personality as George. But one of the final songs they recorded together as a tandem is The Edge of Heaven. I believe that was actually the final single. Memory serves me correct. It's a big dancing around video, and at the end it says goodbye because that was the end. George Michael was leaving Wham forever, and he did. But The Edge of Heaven, great track. Number 9, a tremendous song. I believe this is on the Faith album. It was a big hit. Everybody has these moments when it feels like your relationship's breaking down or it has broken down, and George is asking for one more try. Great song, very emotional song. That's one thing that I'll say about George Michael, too. No matter what you think about him, and what you think about the pop scene of the 1980s, nobody really emoted the way George Michael did. Every word that he sang had a ring of authenticity in it. Number 8, Father Figure. Great video, great song. Love the way this whole thing is put together. And maybe a little bit creepy, but a great song. Number 7, probably one of the most important and poignant songs that George Michael ever recorded. And if I remember correctly, when they released the CD single, it was just like a white cover with like no design or anything. It was like typewritten stuff on there. It was George Michael's Praying for Time. And that was a statement in and of itself. And basically the song is about humanity and about how evil and vile and non religious, I guess you could say, or non-believing that many people in the world are today. And basically he suggests that, maybe the reason Christ hadn't come back is he's got nobody to come back for. And well, whether you agree with that or not, I don't. It is a very poignant thought, to think about we should all be better people. There's no question about it. I think all of us can take some steps to improve and treat each other with dignity and respect and maybe a new level of appreciation. Number 6, we're coming up on the holiday season. You're going to hear this song everywhere over and over and over again when you shop. It's Last Christmas. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. The very next day, you tore it apart. So that'll be everywhere. It was a big, big hit for Wham. Number 5, going back to that Make It Big album. One of the sneaky good songs on that album, I want to say it went top 10, is Everything She Wants. And again, this was one of those things too, kind of the game I guess he played. And he says, now you tell me you're having my baby. I'll tell you that I'm happy if you want me to. So people were like, well, hey, maybe he's not who we think he is. It was all that kind of stuff. And none of it mattered. It was so silly. Number 3, well, I guess it would be nice if I could touch your body. Limp Bizkit covered it, but George Michael wrote it. It's faith, because I got to have faith. And that's a great video too. Cool image, very kind of a throwback vibe in a song. Number 2, though, one of the more controversial songs, and of course this song came to the forefront, kind of in the middle of the AIDS epidemic in the United States. It was the song "I Want Your Sex." A lot of people were saying this is a song promoting casual sex. So they had the disclaimer they put on the video, and like one of the models had like monogamy written on her back. There was a lot of controversy about this, and again, it just kind of frames up the era for us that you couldn't talk about those things. Nowadays you can do anything. I had a discussion with Paul Brown just last night about when Leonard Skinner recorded the song "Mississippi Kid." When he says, "I was born in Mississippi, so I don't take any stuff from you." Well, that's not how they performed it live, but you couldn't use profanity even back then in a lot of music. A lot of record companies would not let you do that. Even though we didn't have the PMRC back then, you just couldn't do it. And so nowadays, it's like the Wild Wild West. You can get out there and you can talk about sex, whatever you want to do. There are a lot of empowered women that speak about it aggressively in their music. And I don't know how much of that is an act and how much of it is authentic. But the reality of it is he was rightly criticized by a lot of people for something they misunderstood. They were saying, hey, the George is out here and he's living this crazy lifestyle and he's promoting it to everybody else. And he's telling our kids they should go have sex. That wasn't what he was talking about. And number 1, though, I think we all know where we're going with this. The number 1 George Michael song, probably the timeless song from Wham off that Make It Big album is Careless Whisper. Seether has recorded it. A lot of people have covered it. Careless Whisper, an amazing song. The sentiment behind it, probably familiar to most of us at some point. The guilty feet have got no rhythm. George really sings this thing like from his soul, and it was one of those things you probably feel like it was from personal experience. But that's your number 1 George Michael / Wham song. It'd be interesting to see how this list goes over. But again, I think it's important to have these dialogues too, because it's so difficult to view the people of yesterday through the lens of today, right? I mean, it's like you look back and say, well, that was kind of the custom for the time, and we've progressed as a society. And there are other people out there that'll say, well, no, we haven't. But it's clear that we have, and maybe we have not progressed as far as we have. We should. I'm a live and let live person. That's been my attitude, probably since I've gotten clean and sober. I used to be very judgmental and felt like that, I had to point out somebody else's flaws to make me feel better about myself. I believe that I've matured beyond that. But my attitude these days is like, do what makes you happy as long as you understand you're going to be accountable for it, right? As long as you do what you do, as long as you're not hurting other people. But at some point, you're going to have to answer for the life that you've led. But you're not going to have to answer to me. And so since I'm not the one that ultimately holds judgment on you, I'm not going to offer judgment on you today. You're not going to appear before me. And maybe you don't believe in any of that. I do. But at the end of the day, if I'm not the person that has ultimate judgment, why should I judge them today? Right? And so again, I want to get very religious and philosophical with you, but I just, that's how I feel about it. I think let people be themselves. And if you don't want to associate with those people based on the life they choose to lead, that's your choice too. You're free to do that. Give them the freedom to be who they want to be, and you have the freedom to decide if you want to associate with them or not. So that's my feeling. I just don't think that I should ever sit in judgment of other people and tell them how they should and shouldn't live their lives. So that's just me. And again, that's probably the most political or even religious that you'll get from me on the show. If you have an idea for the top 10 list, hopefully not political or religious, we're happy to do it for you. The best thing to do is to hit up Roy on Twitter at Dogmatic67, and you can find our great top 10 list on Spotify, also at Dogmatic67. That's DAWGMATIC67. You'll be glad you did. A lot of people that hit us up say, I'd forgotten about this. Did you do this one? We're happy to send you the list, but you can find them yourself. It makes it very easy. Roy, so amazingly loyal to me to put all this stuff together just because he's my friend. We were supposed to go see Judas Priest and Queensryche tomorrow night. I'm going to be unable to go. I'm going to be at the Starville Touchdown Club. I was at 120 last night in Jackson. I misspoke on Monday. It had been a long day, long night, and I misspoke. I was at 120 last night. I want to thank everybody that came out. And in Starkville Touchdown Club on Thursday night. And then I don't have anything Friday. And then Saturday, of course, we'll cover the ball game. And then Sunday, I'll be at Book Martin Cafe from 11 to 3. So if you're in town, still doing some shopping, you come by and pick up a couple books. That's kind of my Sunday haunt, right, after a home game, because I like to visit with you guys. A lot of people just kind of come in. And even if you don't buy a book, I like to be able to talk sports with you guys. And so I'm there most Sundays after a home game during football season. They're not open on Sunday regularly, but during the holiday season they are. And so I like to go down there and visit with you guys. And a lot of times people come and visit and they end up buying a book. So I'm happy to do that. Want to make that as easy for you as possible. And a lot of people, like last night's people said, hey, I have your books, but I said, wait, maybe some friends in your family need a Christmas present. Oh, yeah, let me do that. So maybe you're thinking, I've already got Steve's books, but maybe perhaps some people in your family or your friends may enjoy it too. So there you go. And again, thanks to Roy as always. If you, again, ideas, let us know. We'll eventually get to them. Like I didn't think we were doing George Michael today, and we're doing George Michael today. So here we are. So don't ever think, hey, what Steve wants me to do, he'll never do. Eventually we'll get to him. Eventually we will. All right, next segment of the show brought to you by your friends at Campus Book Mart. We love Campus Book Mart here on the Boneyard. They love you too because they see you as family. They've done a great job for a long time, for a great fan base. I encourage you to give them your business. You're going to be rewarded because they've got the best selection of Mississippi State merchandise in the universe. Bully Shop completely renovated upstairs now, no longer downstairs, which allowed them to expand their selections. You win in that situation. So I think it's important to kind of understand that you need to look no further. Look no further than Campus Book Mart. Visit them at campusbookmart.net and use promo code BSR, which stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson. That'll get you free shipping on all orders over $75. Any order less than $75, absolutely incomplete. Again, be sure and check them out today at campusbookmart.net. Let's talk basketball. And it's fun to talk about basketball again. Would you not agree? I think we all would. I think we're excited about the direction of both programs. Now, we'll start with our ladies. Now 2-1, a tough loss, a 1-point loss at South Dakota State. And the Jackrabbits have been a very quality women's basketball program here as of late. It's not a bad loss. A lot of people look up and say, hey, why did we lose that game? You know, we've played them previously, and they have a very good offensive system. And some complaints about officiating. That's just kind of part of how life works. But we lose by 1. So a game very competitive, the first road game of the year. Your ladies back in action against Alabama State this Friday. That'll be an SEC Network Plus game, so you can watch it on your Roku or on your ESPN app, whatever you use for the streaming platforms. And then back on Sunday against Colorado State. We will hit the road to play Georgetown in the Puerto Rico Classico. How about that? So that's the next, not a true road game. We're going to be a neutral site there against Georgetown in Nebraska. And then we'll begin to kind of round out non-conference play with all of these games at home following the Classico until we get to the Suncoast Challenge. So 4 consecutive games played at Humphrey Coliseum. So Sam Purcell off to a good start. Would have loved to have won that game. I think that's going to be an RPI builder or a net builder for both teams late. I still believe this is a tournament team. And I think when you look at the tenacity in which they play defense and in the way that they kind of get after each other on both ends of the floor, that athletically we're good. I think coaching-wise we're good. And I think we're going to look back eventually and say, you know what, this was a great hire. We love his attitude. It's very infectious. And again, this schedule, it's a good schedule, okay? It is. It's not a real challenging non-conference schedule, maybe outside of some of these neutral site games. But this is a team that's kind of learning to win. And, last year they just didn't have any depth. Played some games with 6 and 7 players. I think we beat Ole Miss with 6 players. And that was an important win for us. It really was, to split with them last year. It's been forever and a day since they swept us. And they certainly were the better team last year. But on that day, we took care of them. So Sam Purcell off to a big start. Take a quick look at some stats here just to kind of see who's standing out, who's not. We talked about that first game. But, individually here, as a team, we're averaging 81 points a game. That'll win a lot of games on the women's side. But Jakelia Jordan, doing what she does. Averaging 15 points a game. Debrisha Poe, 36 points total. It's 12 a game. She's just played in 3 games, played in every game. But what I like about this too is we're sharing minutes. Last year these young ladies had to play so many minutes. They just kind of wore down at the end of the year. But nobody has played more than 30 minutes this year in a game, and that's pretty significant. I think that keeps us fresher longer, and there's really no point to play them in these blowout games late. So we have little fresh legs when we're required to play them. But Anastasia Hayes off to a good start too. 30 minutes a game for her. Not prolific as a scorer, but as a point guard, we just needed to be more of a facilitator. She's been a good free throw shooter, averaging 8 points a game, but leads the team with 19 assists. Got to get the turnovers down a little bit, 8 turnovers, but she does have 7 steals. But, doing a good job, to say the least. But like the makeup of this team, and I think in the end you're going to be very proud. And the thing that I have said many times on this show, we understand that losing is part of competing. We understand that. We accept that. We will not accept a lack of effort. We didn't. And last year we had a lot of effort. Just didn't have a lot of players, a lot of injuries too. But it felt like during the Nikki McCray-Pinson era that we really struggled at times to bring consistent effort. Sam is getting good effort out of these ladies. And again, it's just a small sample size, but they're exciting to watch. It's fun to watch them play. I encourage you to get out and go check them out. Now on the men's side, the Bulldogs 3-0. And again, not a real challenging schedule. That Texas A&M Corpus Christi thing, that's a good one. That's a good win. Just because of the fact they're expected to win their league. That could be a net builder for us in the end. But you take care of Akron 73-54, and you beat Arkansas Pine Bluff 80-47 this past Sunday in the Humphrey Coliseum. The men are back tomorrow night. That's a Thursday night game, obviously 8 p.m. That'll be on the SEC network, and that's down in Fort Myers. If you're down in South Florida, maybe give that an opportunity to go watch the ball game. And then we go from there to play Marquette. Marquette, of course, that's the alma mater of Dwayne Wade. We're back against Georgia Tech or Utah. So going to be 3 games down there and could be pretty quality opponents because game 3 will be either Georgia Tech or Utah. So 3 games as part of this Fort Myers thing. And again, that South Dakota game actually is in Starkville. That's the, quote, regional round. And then we head down to Fort Myers. So I apologize for the confusion. So Thursday night in Starkville. That's eSports night. Crank it up. And then we'll head down to Fort Myers. Those games will be broadcast on Fox Sports 1. But liking what we've seen from this team and a little bit concerned, I guess, in the first half against Corpus Christi. But in the second half, we dominate the game. And the gentleman kind of leading the charge here, some new names, but also some usual suspects. And I think that's important to kind of understand, too, when you're kind of melding a roster here of returning players and new players. And we had a bunch. But Tolu Smith off to a great start. And, again, not playing a ton of minutes here. He and DJ Jeffries right around 25 minutes per game. A lot of names here with double-digit minutes played in each and every game. That's one of those things, and you say it under Ben Howland era, I think in the Rick Ray era too, we didn't have a lot of depth on these teams, and as a result, we kind of wore down as the year went along. But we're allocating some minutes for a lot of different players. A lot of different players right there playing significant minutes when the game is on the line. That'll prepare them for the Southeastern Conference. Your leading scorer, Tolu Smith, 18.3 points per game, averaging just under a double-double at 9.3 rebounds a game. DJ Jeffries, so far, I think playing his best basketball in a Mississippi State uniform. And, he possibly could have left last year. Still, maybe not the prolific three-point shooter. He's 4 of 14, but averaging just under 11 points a game, pulling down 13 rebounds too. That's 4.3 per game. But we got a lot of players here that are on the glass, and I think that's a staple of the Chris Jans era. Rebounding is a team activity. I think he has conveyed that message to the team. Cam Matthews opened the Chris Jans era on the very first possession defensively for State with a block. He has 6, which leads the team. We only have 13. That's a number right there that it's probably a little bit surprising. Tolu just has a couple. But as teams begin to test us a little more in the post, I think you'll see those numbers go up. But again, pretty happy with what we've seen so far. And there's a lot going on with basketball. But I think for the first time in a long time, we can be really excited about basketball. Wasn't always like that. For a while there, we were excited about the women, but not the men. Then the men got hot, and then the women didn't. So I guess a couple years ago when both...
Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches.
Urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.
Teams made the tournament, we felt like, okay, we're on the right track, and then things completely changed for us. But I'm excited about the hires, and I've been encouraged by your social media traffic. We need to kind of get that traffic into Humphrey Coliseum, right? We do. We need to try to find a way to make that happen. I don't know if we do it in shifts or whatever, but we need to find a way to kind of make the Hump roar again, because I do believe we have a pair of coaches and some very talented coaching staffs. They're going to win a lot of basketball games for us over the course of the next few years. All right, final segment of the show brought to you by our friends at Portico. I told you guys before, if I was moving to Starkville, I'd move to Portico. And you know what? I just may. You never know. I'm a riddle wrapped inside an enigma. You just never know what I may do. I may just show up over at Portico one day and be your neighbor. How fun would that be? We'd be out there in the street having that street party. Your kids come to my house and trick or treat. I'd scare them to death, right? Be a good time. If you're considering that move to Starkville, let me encourage you to give the folks at Portico an opportunity to serve you. You can start with a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home, go all the way up to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath home. You'll be glad you did, because you're going to have a lot of your friends and relatives want to come stay with you and go attend the Mississippi State sporting events, because you're going to be 1.1 miles away from the Mississippi State campus. How cool would that be? It'd be amazing, right? So what are you waiting for? Give our friend Brooks Bryan a call. He's my friend, your friend, a friend to Mississippi State, part of a great group of residential developers bringing this wonderful, wonderful development to Starkville. Very easy to get to. You can turn off 82 on the 12, take a right on Pat Station Road, go through the four-way stop. There it is on the right-hand side. Right there. You can give yourself a self-guided tour next time you come to town. But if you need more information, I'm sure you will, hit up Brooks at 601-416-8075. Again, 601-416-8075. That's Portico. Make Portico your next move. Okay, let's take some time today. We kind of got through those segments a little quick because I wanted to be able to take all the time we need to ensure that we're kind of up to date on where we are in this bowl pecking order. There's a lot left to play out. Now, as it stands today, with 2 games to play, Georgia is in the playoff. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, right? They're number 1 team in the playoff. They'll remain number 1 team in the playoff. You look at their schedule, there's no reason to think that they're going to lose a game. I mean, we're still got to go play all the games. But, yeah, one of the things I would share with you, too, looking at how hard Georgia plays, it's not just a talent issue. It's an effort issue with them. Those guys really get after you. And that's the best thing that ever happens is when you've got great players that buy into what you're doing, makes all the difference in the world. So they're going to travel to Kentucky. And Kentucky, of course, has struggled as of late. I don't see Kentucky putting up much of a fight. I don't think Georgia blows them out, but I don't think it's much of a fight. And then the next week, Georgia will host Georgia Tech. And then the first weekend in December, of course, they'll be in the SEC championship game against LSU. We have seen both of those teams play. I think LSU can give Georgia a game. I don't know that they can stay with them. But I think that's going to be a competitive SEC championship game. I do think ultimately Georgia wins, and it maintains their position as the number one team in the playoff, and as the defending champions will have an opportunity to go defend their national championship. So at this point, there is no reason to expect Georgia to drop from the playoff. Then I believe, as it stands today and how we expect the schedule to finish up, you're going to have three teams in the New Year's Six. Tennessee, if Tennessee doesn't make the playoff, but either way, they're up, whether they're in New Year's Six or in the playoffs. They're up. But Tennessee, again, a team, we've said it a million times, we expect them to be good. We didn't realize they'd be great. They've been really, really good this year. 91, their only loss, of course, to Georgia, and that was a competitive game for a while, too. In many respects. I mean, Georgia had a little trouble putting them away, but you never felt like Georgia was, really in jeopardy of losing the game. But Tennessee puts up 66 on Missouri last week. They travel to South Carolina and then finish with Vandy, and they don't have the burden of playing the SEC championship game. So there's no reason to think right now that Tennessee will finish any worse than 11-1. I think at the beginning of the year I said 10-2. They're better than that. Pretty crazy. But South Carolina and Beamer ball, I just don't think they can compete. Of course, I think Tennessee will knock down Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt, of course, a big win last week for them. But Tennessee should finish the year 11-1, which may get them in the playoffs. It certainly gets them into New Year's Six. And there's LSU. LSU currently 8-2. They do have the SEC championship game to go. And depending on how the rest of the schedule plays out, that could be an issue for them, right? Let's say you drop another game and the SEC championship game, you might drop out of the New Year's Six. But when you look at what they have left to play, you got UAB this weekend. That's not going to be any trouble. That's senior day down at Tiger Stadium. And then you travel to A&M, who has already been eliminated from the race. Nobody down there is motivated to play a college football game. Just not. An abysmal year. Listen, there have been a few teams in my lifetime that I thought were going to be really, really good. They ended up being terrible. I even wrote an article about one that I'm kind of famous for. This is one that this A&M team, there's no excuse for them to be 3-7. There's really not. There clearly is a culture issue there. Jimbo's got issues. I don't think they fire him. Maybe they should. They probably ought to fire Ross Bjork too, for being honest about it. I mean, what a terrible deal that you've saddled the university with. But LSU will take care of A&M. And so at this point, we project LSU to finish the regular season with a 10-2 record. And then they'll lose to Georgia, which, won't be a bad loss, but they should still be able to get into the New Year's Six with a 10-3 record because of, the fact they've won the Western Division and, their loss at the end of the year will be to Georgia, the number one team. And then there's Alabama. Now, Alabama also 8-2. And you look at their schedule, Austin Peay this weekend, and then Auburn. Now, that Iron Bowl looks a little bit dicier than it did a month ago. But I think at this point, we would project Alabama to beat Austin Peay and Auburn. Auburn is playing really, really tough. Respect the fact that Cadillac Williams has got those guys playing a good brand of football. I just don't think they can go into Tuscaloosa. And so I share that with you because I think Alabama, despite the fact that they're not going to be in the playoff, will do enough to make the New Year's Six. So that gives you 4 teams above the pool of 6. Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, and Alabama. The next team up for discussion is Ole Miss. Ole Miss right there 8-2. They're behind both Alabama and LSU in the standings and in the playoff rankings. Ole Miss, of those teams that we've discussed, has the most difficult schedule remaining. Could they play their way into 10-2? They absolutely could. And then things get a little bit interesting. But I don't think that's going to be the case. Could they work their way into New Year's Six? That they could, but you can't get 4 teams in a New Year's Six from one conference, if I remember this correctly. So at this point, you think Ole Miss is probably projected as a Citrus Bowl, right? Probably. Now, of course, if Alabama or somebody drops out of the New Year's Six, then it bumps Ole Miss down. But if you had to call it today, Ole Miss is in the citrus. The issue that Ole Miss has, a road game to Arkansas that's going to be in some frigid weather. Now, I don't think KJ Jefferson's going to play, to be honest with you. I think there's some rumors out of Fayetteville that KJ may be done for the year. Now, true or untrue, there is some question about who's going to play quarterback this weekend for Arkansas. I like the Razorbacks in the game for a couple reasons, and we'll get into that a lot more on Friday. But number one, Ole Miss has not really played well in Fayetteville in recent years. They've had a win or two there, but by and large, Arkansas's kind of had their number up there. They're kind of used to that overcast, misty, gray, miserable football. Ole Miss really not. And so it's very difficult to go play in Fayetteville in November. We've been there. We know. The coldest I've ever been in my life. Razorback Stadium, 2015. Terrible. But at least it wasn't wet. We'll see what happens this weekend. But they're forecasting temperatures in the teens before the game is over. It'd be miserable. I can't imagine even walking outside, much less having to go hit somebody. And then Ole Miss then will host Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. It is conceivable that Ole Miss could lose both ball games. If they do, they finish the year 8-4, and then ultimately, I think, drop into the pool of 6, and I think the citrus would take somebody else. Right? Make sense? The citrus gets to pick. Like you earn your way into the playoff in the New Year's Six based on the performance in the playoff rankings. The citrus gets their pick. The SEC has no bearing at all on the Citrus Bowl. They get to make their pick. And so they're not required to follow the model. So they can just say, you know what, we want this team. This team has never been, or this team hasn't been here in 5 years. They can pick them. So they could still pick Ole Miss, but I don't think that you would if they finish the year on a 3-game losing streak. Right? So probably not going to be a very motivated Ole Miss fan base to go buy tickets, especially if Lane Kiffin leaves and goes to Auburn. A lot of rumors suggest that he will. I don't know that I believe him. But all of a sudden you have a team on a losing streak and then a coaching change. Well, you're not – I could see Ole Miss dropping considerably in the pecking order for the pool of 6 just because of the fact how motivated are people going to be to go buy tickets, right? All right, then you've got a log jam behind Ole Miss as it sits right now with 6 and 4 teams. Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi State. All of them safely in the pool of 6. All of them already bowl eligible. But how do you begin to rank them? How do you pack this thing out? How much does geography play a factor in all this? The team to watch, in my estimation, is Florida. They have kind of quietly just trenched on this year. Had a couple of big losses early. They beat Utah, and I thought, hey, they're ahead of schedule. Then they lose to Kentucky. They lose to Tennessee. Nearly lost to South Florida. Eke by Missouri. And then they They get blasted by LSU. They get blasted by Georgia. And then they get after A&M last week. And so, again, this is a good team, not a great team. That was 2 weeks ago. They blow out South Carolina. So it's a 2-game winning streak here as of late. And then you look at what's left. That's Vanderbilt. That should be a W. And then you're at Florida State. Well, the Vanderbilt game obviously counts in the SEC standings, but the Florida State game counts overall when you begin to put the bowl pecking order together. Florida State, currently ranked 19th in the country, playing at home at Doak Walker Stadium. That's at best a toss-up for Florida. And, of course, Florida won the game last year and kept Mike Norvell and those guys out of the bowl picture. And Florida eked in at 6 and 6. And so I share that with you because I expect them to beat Vanderbilt. At this point, I don't know that I could say I expect them to beat Florida State. So if they end the year with a 7-5 record, that changes their bowl projection considerably. And I think there are going to be a lot of teams in some premium bowl games with 8 and 7 wins, just because there's so much parity in the league this year. But Florida is a team, obviously, that could trend in the right direction. Let's say they win against Vanderbilt, they beat Florida State. Now all of a sudden you've got a rejuvenated fan base. It's like, hey, we're finally headed in the right direction. We end the year on a 4-game winning streak. And offensively, they have been much better as of late. That's an attractive bowl team for me. You can say first-year coach, Billy Napier, took us a little while to get going, but we're going now. Those fans will be motivated to go buy those tickets. So Florida, to me, is the team to really watch in the pool of 6 to really kind of push ahead and get one of those prestigious and very coveted Florida bowl games. After that, there is Kentucky. Kentucky currently the same record as Florida. They would hold the tiebreaker in many respects, if that matters at all. But Kentucky, 6-4 overall, 3-4 in the league. They're going to play Georgia this weekend. Okay, that's a loss. Now, Kentucky may compete for a while, but Georgia ultimately should win that ball game. So you're finishing no better than 7-5. And when they dropped that ball game to Vanderbilt, we all knew, well, that completely changes the context of the bowl structure for the pool of 6. Because if you remember, last time we did this exercise, I suggested Kentucky was maybe the team to watch that had some upward mobility. Well, now they've given that away, and now, assuming they beat Louisville, they'd be 7-5. They could be 6-6. And despite the fact that Mississippi State lost to Kentucky, State could end up with a better bowl game. Because you got to think, if State wins this weekend, you're 7-5 no matter what. You got 7 wins no matter what happens in the Egg Bowl. So Kentucky, even though some people even predicted them to win the SEC, may just go to the bowl game. Maybe 500 this year. Could end the year with a losing record. How crazy is that? Told you guys they weren't any good. I still can't believe we lost to them. All right, so rounding out the East is the Eastern Division 6-4 teams is South Carolina. Now, the South Carolina fans, pretty excited about Beamer Ball. They've had some wins this year. Of course, the big win against Kentucky at Kentucky. It seemed like a bigger deal at the time. They were ranked 13th in the country. Of course, they didn't have Will Levis, and so you think that's a big advantage for you. But Levis has not played well as of late. But South Carolina, has beaten Kentucky. Then they beat Texas A&M. They lose to Missouri, which kind of took some of the bloom off the rose there. They beat Vanderbilt and got blasted last week. Now, we expect them to lose the final 2 games. So in the end, I think South Carolina drops down to the bottom of the pool of 6 with a 6-6 record. And again, Mississippi State, you win this weekend, you got at least 7 wins, so you should be above South Carolina in the bowl pecking order. So we're going to have a chance to kind of leapfrog some teams here in these final 2 weeks. But, of course, South Carolina this weekend hosts Tennessee, and then they travel to Clemson. That's 2 top 10 teams for the final 2 games. Those games are both losses, I think. Now, Beamer has, in the past, found a way to kind of shake things up and upset somebody. Did that last year. I just don't see it this year. Spencer Rattler is a bit of a loose cannon. You never know what he's going to do. I don't know if you realize this. He's only thrown 8 touchdown passes this year. Pretty crazy. So they'll end the year 6-6 and should be behind Mississippi State in the bowl pecking order. We talk about State. Obviously, you got East Tennessee State. You win these last 2 and you finish 8-4. Now, all of a sudden, State is the team with upward mobility in the bowl pecking order. Because of the 4 teams that we're currently tied with, Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina, you're basically assured, if things follow the script here, that State will finish with no better or no worse than the same record as Kentucky, and potentially a game better than Kentucky and South Carolina. So all of a sudden, that 4-way tie is broken up, and then Florida and Mississippi State are right there. And so what happens, Florida beats Vanderbilt, loses to Florida State, ends up 7-5, and State goes 8-4. Well, now all of a sudden, State is in position, and this is not a guarantee, but State would be in position to get the most coveted or prestigious of the pool of 6 games. A lot has to happen, but it's conceivable that State, in the end, could be considered the number 6 team in the Southeastern Conference out of 14. You have your 4 teams up, and then Ole Miss is right there, and then all of a sudden State has the same record. Let's say State beats Ole Miss. Now all of a sudden you begin to think, okay, would the Citrus pick State? Because let's say State and Ole Miss have the same record and State wins the game. I don't think you can then reward Ole Miss with the better bowl game. But again, the Citrus gets to pick there. It's not the SEC. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that State could be in a very warm destination for the holidays. It's important to understand that. Now, the teams behind us, and this is where things get really dicey here, because none of these teams will be able to surpass Mississippi State in the standings. because all of them have at least 5 losses as it stands right now. So State wins this weekend, you're no worse than 7-5. And so these teams, the best they can be if they win out is 7-5. And so nobody would leapfrog State that's currently behind them unless somehow State loses to East Tennessee State, which is just inconceivable at this point. But Arkansas is a team right there, a very desperate team. Right? A team that one time was a top 10 team, currently 5-5 and just 2-4 in the conference. And you kind of felt it was happening early on. You know, when they lost to A&M, you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're not going to be able to contend for the West. They still got Alabama to play, right? And they didn't. You know, they lose to A&M and then lose to Alabama. Well, at that point, it's done. You're out of it. And then they roll into Starkville and get beat 40-17. They rebound to beat BYU, and they beat Auburn, and then they lose to Liberty. You know, it's like your season is what it is. But this is a team that has underperformed this year. Yes, they've had some injuries, but there were a lot of people that were kind of beating Mississippi State up. Hey, look how much farther Arkansas is ahead of you guys last year. Well, the script is kind of flipped this year. And at this point, Arkansas still not bowl eligible. Let that sink in for a second. With 2 games to play, Arkansas's got a must-win game coming up in the next 2 weeks. You got Ole Miss this weekend. I do think they'll win that one. And I'm still abiding by my conspiracy theory that Arkansas will beat Ole Miss and then lose to Missouri, thus pushing the Tigers into the bowl picture too. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and name names or anything like that. This is all just kind of in my head, which may be a dangerous thing. But if you got an official out there that'll throw a flag to determine the outcome of a game, you don't think somebody would say, you know what, there's a lot of money at stake here. Arkansas is not going anywhere special anyway. Maybe let's give Missouri the benefit of the doubt. You know, Missouri may not need the help. They're playing better as of late. But Arkansas, again, very, very, very much in a precarious position. And really, they can no longer leapfrog Mississippi State. Just at this point, it's not conceivable at this point. So Mississippi State should get a better bowl opportunity than Auburn. Then that brings you to the rest of the group that all need to win out in order to get to a bowl game. And this is where it gets awfully dicey. We mentioned South Carolina, and then we'll get to Missouri. And I guess I kind of misspoke there, so forgive me. Missouri, 4-6, beginning of the year, I thought they were going to struggle to get to a bowl game. It is now very much conceivable, of course, they should win this weekend against New Mexico State. Should. You never know what happens in college football. There's always something crazy that could happen. But they should be able to handle that, which would make them a 5-6 team heading into senior day next weekend against Arkansas. And New Mexico State this year is 4-5. You know, it's not like it's just some great team. Now, the good thing is they've won 3 in a row, you know, so they might be able to go in there and compete. But it's been against, you know, New Mexico, UMass, Lamar. I just wonder how tight Arkansas is going to be when they had to go to Missouri, because I think Missouri is going to be loose and fast. Missouri has already accepted the fact they've got to win their final 2 games to get in the postseason. Arkansas has just been needing to get one, and then, you know, of course, the loss to Liberty kind of puts them behind the 8 ball a little bit. And so, you know, all the pressure in many respects is on Arkansas to win this week, because I think Missouri is going to get them. And I may be completely wrong about that. I think Missouri is playing better. And I think in the end, with all that money at stake, you know, that's just kind of how I see it. And so I think at that point, you know, Missouri becomes one of those teams you have to kind of consider, okay, where do they fall in the pecking order? Because we're talking pool of 6 here, and you got Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina, and State. You could have a 6-6 team in the pool of 6. Yeah, it's true. You could. It's crazy to think about how that's all kind of played out this year. Those are the things like I think we all expect it to be a competitive year this year. And I think probably 2 or 3 weeks in, we thought, you know what? We got a couple of great teams and a couple of really good teams and kind of everybody else. I think everybody else is a much bigger group than we anticipated. But, you know, looking again, you know, Missouri should be able to win their last 2. And again, that last one's a toss-up. But at 6-6, they're in the pool of 6. Arkansas, 6-6 or 7-5, they're in the pool of 6. And so after the pool of 6, of course, is your extra bowl games, right? You know, Birmingham Bowl, the Weed Whacker Bowl, whatever it is. the only teams that could conceivably fill those spots will have to win out. That's Vanderbilt and Auburn. Now, we know what Vanderbilt's schedule looks like, and the chances of them winning those games are few and far between. They get to host both of them, Florida and Tennessee. I think at this point, nobody's expecting them to win either of those games, so I think it's pretty safe to say that Vandy last week basically just staved off another week of elimination. So once they're eliminated, the SEC will not be able to reach all its SEC bowl tie-ins. That's pretty crazy too. Then, of course, there's Auburn. Auburn, of course, Western Kentucky this weekend. That should be a win. And honestly, outside of Georgia, has anybody played harder the last 2 weeks than Auburn? I mean, seriously. Give Cadillac Williams a lot of credit. And that's one of the things that I think about, too. If you're John Cohen, all of a sudden, if Cadillac can beat Western Kentucky and find a way to win the Iron Bowl, you almost have a Gary Henderson situation on yourself. Because then all of a sudden there'll be this groundswell of support. I mean, they could argue they should have beat Mississippi State. Of course, some of our own lack of execution and ineptitude allowed them to kind of stay in the ball game there. But they played hard. There's no doubting the effort. And then they beat Texas A&M. They beat Western Kentucky. You could end the year on a 3-game winning streak. It's pretty crazy to think about. And you beat Alabama all of a sudden. I think hiring Cadillac full-time may be a little bit of a dicey proposition, but you got to keep him in some capacity, whether it be running backs coach or whatever. You got to keep him after the job that he's done and the way people love him. But I think you got to give him an interview too. I don't think he gets the job, and I don't think that he's a guy that would cause problems if he didn't. A lot of times they don't want to keep the interim guy around because people are beholden to him. I think in this case it's a good thing because I think Cadillac is all in at Auburn. Cadillac's made his money. He's coaching at Auburn for the love of Auburn and the love of the game of football. He's not going to go in there and do anything detrimental for Auburn football. But it could be awfully interesting if Auburn wins these last 2 games, for sure. It would not be a enviable situation in many respects. It would be a groundswell of support for him. But they're going to need to win those 2. I don't think they do. I think they beat Western Kentucky and then lose to Alabama. So that leaves us, with pool of 6 teams, assuming Arkansas and Missouri get bowl eligible. And we could see a situation here too, like if Ole Miss beats Arkansas and then Arkansas beats Missouri, you could have a situation here where there's one other team that drops out. Then Missouri doesn't make it. And what if Arkansas, or what if New Mexico State goes and upsets Missouri? You don't expect that, but there's a reason we play the games. What if New Mexico State beats Missouri, Ole Miss beats Arkansas, and then Missouri beats Arkansas, and then both of those teams are 5-7. It's pretty crazy to think about it. Who thought we'd be in this situation here where you're kind of discussing the fate of 500 teams? Pretty nuts. There's not a lot of greatness in the SEC this year. There's not. There is some greatness, but there's not a lot. It's not one of those years where you look at and say, hey, these handful of teams dominated the conference. There is a lot of parity within the league this year. If we talk about any given Saturday, that's truly the case. So let's look at the pool of 6 here, right? So here are the bowl games that are considered the pool of 6 for the SEC this year. It's the Texas Bowl. They call it the Tex-Act Texas Bowl. That's played December 28th. There is the SRS Distributors Las Vegas Bowl. That's played December 17th. I have been told that Mississippi State officials, not a big fan of that. I'd love to go to Vegas, but I don't think we end up there. I think somebody else does, especially with the December 17th kick. The TransPerfect Music City Bowl, that's December 31st. Then there's, of course, the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. We're very familiar with that, and I think a lot of people would kind of snooze on that because we've been there so many times. Then there's the AutoZone Liberty Bowl in Memphis. We won't be there. And then there's the ReliaQuest Bowl, formerly known as the Outback Bowl. That's on January 2nd. So based on how things project today, Mississippi State will be in one of those 6 bowl games. Crazier things have happened, I guess. But, again, I guess there is an outside shot. Like if Ole Miss loses out, State wins out, and then the traffic falls the way it should for State, I guess the Citrus could pick Mississippi State. I'm certainly not expecting that. I think given the choice between Florida and Mississippi State, the Citrus would pick Florida every time, even though we've never been. So how do I think this is all going to play out, right? So if I have to call it, how we're going to project, if Ole Miss loses to Arkansas, loses to Mississippi State, finishes year 8-4, I still think they're going to get a pretty good bowl game. But I think there has to be probably some politicking involved in the event there's a coaching change at Ole Miss. But assuming Arkansas makes it, and I believe they will, I think Arkansas is probably a good fit, for Texas Bowl. But I believe Mississippi State at this point, based on the current flow of traffic, should have a really good opportunity to end up, in the state of Florida, because of the fact that there's going to be a lot of 7-5 and 6-6 teams behind us. And so, again, that's where we are. And again, I don't think we fill the Birmingham Bowl or the Gasparilla Bowl. I just don't think we're going to have the teams for it. So other teams will fill that spot. So you'll be in a pool of 6. You won't be in a New Year's 6. But, again, should be a great holiday destination for us. I said on the show a couple weeks ago, I felt if we lost the Egg Bowl, we'd be in Texas. And I do think that's probably the preferred destination if we finish 7-5 rather than Las Vegas. If you finish 8-4, you win the Egg Bowl, I think you're either in the Outback Bowl or the Gator Bowl. And I think if you could probably, make some political maneuvering there, you could probably get back in the Outback Bowl. But again, just kind of depends on how it's all going to shake loose. I'd love to go back to the Outback Bowl. I like going to bowl games anyway. But, we went there last time and we should have won the game. Remember how hot it was, too? It was crazy. But, yeah, there's a realistic possibility for State to be in the Florida Bowl game. And I don't think there's any question if State wins out, State is in Florida. If not, I think we're likely in Texas. Could be some shakeup there. They could send us back to Music City. How this whole thing works, and we go over this every year. Outside of the Citrus Bowl, none of the bowls pick. Like the ones that have SEC bowl tie-ins, basically they sign a contract with the Southeastern Conference, and then the SEC delivers them a team. Like the bowl reps come around, that sort of stuff, but they don't pick a team. The SEC, and there's been some things in the past where some teams were kind of passed over for other teams in the name of ticket sales and not really in the case of merit. It happened to Ole Miss. When Eli was there, Alabama ends up going to Independence Bowl instead of Ole Miss, and Ole Miss should have gone. I mean, it breaks my heart, but, that's not fair. And so the SEC kind of stepped in and said, here's how we're going to do it. So the schools then will list their 3 preferences. Which 3 schools which bowl game would they want to go to? And then the bowls themselves submit their 3, and it goes to the SEC office. So let's say, for an example, that Mississippi State says, hey, my number 1 preference is the Outback Bowl. And the Outback Bowl says, hey, my number 1 preference is Mississippi State. There's no need for any further discussion. You just match them up and send them on. Everybody's happy, right? We had some issue a couple of years ago when A&M got sent to the Belk Bowl, and they were like, hey, we've been in this league all these years and never got a chance to go to Florida. Well, they got to go the next year, So there's always some maneuvering, and again, the league office ultimately decides which SEC team goes where in this pool of 6. Now, there'll be people out here writing articles and say, hey, I really hear that this bowl wants this team. And that's great, but ultimately it's going to be Greg Sankey and the folks at the SEC office that make that decision. So understand that going in. And I've read with great interest a lot of these national projections, and you can tell they don't know that. They don't understand that. The SEC sends a team. The bowl doesn't select a team. Because in the end, there have been some bowl games before where the team didn't pick the bowl and the bowl didn't pick the team. But there was like a game of musical chairs, so that spot was still open, so we had to plug a team in there from the Southeastern Conference, and we did. That's how Texas A&M ultimately ended up in the Belk Bowl. I don't know if it was the Mayonnaise Bowl then yet or not. I think it was still the Belk Bowl. But my point being is that this process seems rather complicated. It's really not. Once the playoff picks are done, the playoff rankings are final, that protocol is already firmly established. So everybody that qualifies for New Year's 6 or playoff, well, they're gone. They're no longer in discussions for the SEC Bowl tie-ins. And then there is that pool of 6. And then after the Citrus Bowl makes their selection, and they usually let the league know well in advance of that so they can all have their announcement together, then Greg Sankey and the guys up there go ahead and put all this together. And so that's how it's all going to play out. I think it's important to understand, despite the fact that it's been an up and down year, it can still end exactly how we expected it to. Maybe not exactly how we wanted it to. But if you end up 8-4 with the egg and in a Florida bowl game, I don't know how you could consider the season anything other than a success. Sometimes we get caught up in arguing about the minutia of things. We get so caught up in the minor things, we lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is having winning seasons, improving upon them, getting to better bowl games. If you found out, be at the beginning of the year, if we said, hey, we're 8-4 with the Egg and we're headed to Outback Bowl, we're headed to Gator Bowl, you'd be like, yep, I'll take it right now. Well, now it's here. The opportunity for that to happen presents itself. But if I was a betting man, I would say lose the Egg, Texas Bowl, win the Egg, either in the Gator or the Outback Bowl. That's just how I would suspect it to be today. And again, an outside chance the Citrus could pick us, but I just, the SEC doesn't have a lot of influence over that decision, and so I think ultimately if us in Florida are in a similar situation, they take Florida. And that's a team, too, would have a lot of juice. Like if they beat Florida State, the Citrus Bowl would have no trouble selling tickets. Geography plays a major factor in that, but I don't know how you could argue against Florida maybe deserving that due to a late season push. So those are the teams to kind of watch around us. Again, I think South Carolina will fade considerably down the stretch, and I think there's a possibility Kentucky could do the same. And so I think Ole Miss, Florida, Mississippi State all kind of right there together at the top of the pool of 6. That's kind of how I see it. And you can look at it and say, well, we're basing our bowl projections on how things look today. Well, that's great today, but there's a lot left to do. There's a lot of football left to be played that is going to ultimately shake this thing out. And so the fact that the State and Ole Miss are both in contention for potentially the same bowl games, considering how the season started for Ole Miss, I think in some ways is a surprise to a lot of people. But it's all within our reach, and we control our own destiny here. You simply win the next 2 games, and you're going to get a really good bowl game somewhere. You don't, probably going to Houston, Texas to follow that traffic. So that's to look at it today. Now, we'll be back on Friday, and we'll talk about, we'll preview the weekend, kind of look at where your stat leaders are and things of that nature. And we'll talk a little bit about some more basketball stuff and hopefully some recruiting stuff. We've got a couple irons in the fire there. Some new offers have gone out to 23 prospects, including some within the state of Mississippi. So it could be some new developments then. And there's some things we're kind of watching. Paul Jones and I both kind of keeping our finger on the pulse here. Couple of names that we're watching and could see, some news here in the next couple of weeks. I think there's probably a lot of players will kind of hold out until they take their official visits. But I do think there are some recent offerees of Mississippi State that may be a little closer to making a decision. And, the staff may tell them to hold off till we take the visit. But I do think there are some guys that are trending well for Mississippi State. Remind you, as always, go to dogpilebook.com and you can get all my sports books there. And the turkey book, it's there too. Don't forget the turkey book. Great image on the front of that thing. You'll be glad you got it. And Stark Villains gear, always available at starkvillains.com. I want to get out of here. A couple things, too, that it's been a difficult week in many respects for me, and I don't want to get too personal about that kind of stuff. And sometimes I do on these shows. But I want to just tell you this, that I have spent a lot of time in my life, I guess in some respects, kind of building a brand. And it wasn't always the case. I just went to work like everybody else. I did a job. And then, when I got into sports media, it was important for me to kind of get established. And there are times that I do some things that are just not necessary. And what I mean by that is, like, I look up a lot. I want to give numbers for you guys. But there are sometimes, too, that, like, I'll stay up late at night and I'll research stuff and ultimately never use it. And I went to a Franklin Covey planning class years ago. And I'm going to start getting back some of those principles. It's like my kids I got one kid left in the house, and he will leave to go to Mississippi State next summer. And, that's it. And I think sometimes, too, it's like, when your kids start driving, all of a sudden your schedule changes, because in the past, your schedule is their schedule. You got to drop them off for ball practice or pick them up from school or whatever. And so what happens with me sometimes is when I know that I don't have anywhere to be, I just kind of work when I want to, which ultimately means I work all the time. And I don't necessarily do enough fun things for myself, but I will share this with you kind of as a cautionary tale in some respects for other people. It's that I have really tried hard to be a lot of things to a lot of people. I've really worked hard at that. And then the people that have paid for that, have been my family. And so I say that because I'm going to make some changes. You're not going to be getting a Boneyard at 2 in the morning, right? I'm making some changes in my life as far as scheduling, kind of getting back to things I want to do. Because like sometimes, like even today, I got up and said, well, I don't have anywhere to be until media opportunity, so I can just kind of record the show when I want to. I'm going to be a lot more structured and regimented with this. And there's some other things too, because of the fact that maybe I haven't been as organized as I used to be. I haven't done my recovery podcast in many months, and that was something that was very important to me. And I have a lot of people that asked me to do that. And so I'm not going to have this fly by my seat of my pants type thing again. I'm going to get back to basics here. So my commitment to you today is I'm going to do my best to start getting you the show around the same time on production day. So like a lot of times if you come up, it's sometimes it's there when you go to work, and other times it's not up until like 5 o'clock. And so I'm going to try to do a better job of putting a schedule together and sticking to that schedule and getting that stuff out there. And I think it'll help my stress and anxiety, but also too, it's going to free me up to go do things. Because my kids are scattered now. I've got a son in Rogers, Arkansas. I've got a daughter in Palm Bay, Florida. I've got another daughter that will graduate, eventually go on to law school. And so I can't just consistently just wing it. And I have made it a long way just kind of winging it at times. And so my hope is you get better shows and you get better production value from all this stuff because I'm going to get a lot more organized. And I've got some things that are very important to me that I have not maybe committed enough of my emotional energy and time to. And so I'm going to do that. I've got to do some things for myself. We always talk about the whole self-care thing, and some of that, there's a lot that is defined in many ways. But one of the things that I learned in that Frank and Covey class is you have to have personal goals too, in addition to your professional goals. And over the course of maybe the last 7-8 years, that hadn't really been the case. Like all of my goals have really been professional, not really with my family or even personal stuff for myself. I used to always have this goal that one day I wanted to coach a soccer team to a state championship. And I haven't coached soccer in a long time. I coached rec when we got here, but I used to coach travel team soccer. And so eventually at some point I'd like to get into that again, or maybe even, being a volunteer coach at a high school or whatever. I have coached soccer and baseball on the high school level, and basketball on the middle school level, and so and won championships at all. And so I guess not in baseball, but my point being is I share that with you not to just sit here and talk about myself, but to encourage you maybe don't make the mistakes that I have made, because I have been so incredibly career driven over the course of the last few years. And of course, I own the business now, I own jeanspage.com, and so I've been successful in all that. But I can't sit here and tell you that everything is all, peaches and cream. I wish that I could sit here and tell you. Life is hard sometimes. It is. And there's always a trade-off. And so I'm going to be committing more time to my family. You're going to get the same number of shows, but my hope is that I can deliver them more consistently in a timely manner, so you're not having to wonder all day when the Boneyard's going up. And it's just like on Monday, the show was up at 5 in the morning, and today it's not going to be up until around 2 o'clock. And so I want to do a better job for me, my family, and for all of you. And so I just encourage you to consider that in your own life. And I hate to give these platitudes and feel like I'm preaching to you, but I can tell you that, I have had to reevaluate some things because of my own level of personal satisfaction. And also, too, the growing reality that I'm going to be an empty nester next year, right? And so those are the things that I think about. What in the world is going to happen when I'm, here all the time? There are times I have got to get this done before the kid gets home, we got dinner, whatever. I don't know. And so I guess in some ways you call it a bit of a midlife crisis, but I'm just kind of evaluating some things, and I've got to do a better job with every bit of that. And, looking forward to going out and seeing my kids too. And that's one thing I think about too, is as scattered as they are, I've got to be able to allocate and budget some time to go do that. We have a very busy schedule when it comes to covering Mississippi State. Now, I don't cover basketball, men's or women's, until we get into SEC play, and then I only cover big games because Paul and Robbie do such a great job. We don't need to go out there and have 3 stories unless it's a big game or a big win. And so I go in those roles as an assist type thing. It's still their primary story. And let's go to kind of do a sidebar because I know you guys are excited to learn more about a big ball game. But, it's tough sometimes. It's tough keeping this schedule, and it's tough keeping this machine moving. And I don't say that I feel overwhelmed. I just will tell you that there are some things that I wish that I would have done differently. I wish that I would have done some things differently when it's come to my time, because I give so much to so many people. There are sometimes I don't have it to give to people that matter the most. And so I'm reevaluating that, and I'm going to be doing a lot of things differently as we kind of move forward. And so I share that with you because, we sit here and we talk about sports sometimes, and I think it's important sometimes we talk about real stuff too. Not that the sports stuff doesn't matter. I mean, it's how I make my living. But I think it's important too to kind of understand we can kind of learn from each other. And I think, when you reach a point in your life and maybe you reach a certain level of success, you kind of look back and think, there was a price to pay for all of this. And was it worth it? I would say yes. But there are probably some people in my life that would probably wish I was around a little bit more. And so, again, there are a lot of things that I do that maybe are not necessary. And so I'm reevaluating every bit of that. And I'm committed to giving you guys a better product as we move forward. So that's it. And there was a lot of people that reached out yesterday that thought that like something was really wrong with me. And I appreciate that very, very much. I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. Everybody around me is going to be fine. So you guys are awesome. And there's so many people. I wrote a poem on Facebook that, I'm in recovery. And so I wrote a poem that was kind of recovery based. And that's usually when I write that stuff is like when I'm dealing with something, good, bad, or indifferent. If I'm feeling emotion, I don't want to waste the emotion. And so I use it to create something. And a lot of people took it too literally. And I had people calling me thinking I was going to relapse, and that just wasn't the case. But you guys that did reach out to me, your genuine concern for me is very moving. And some of you guys even choked me up a little bit, to be honest with you. And I'm not choked up there. I had needed a sneeze. But anyway, it's rewarding to say the least. But listen, let me get out of here. I've preached long enough. Thank you guys for your support of the Boneyard and all the things we do at genespage.com. We appreciate it so much when you guys share and retweet our content. It means more than I can ever express to you guys, too. Let's have a great week. We look forward to seeing you guys back on Friday as we prepare for the SEC football weekend. Until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.
Tired of long waits and rushed care at the ER and urgent care clinic? Next time, stay home and let Dispatch Health bring the power of the hospital to you.
I call Dispatch Health. A care team of medical professionals actually come to your house.
They're the same caliber of people that you would see if you were at a hospital or an urgent care.
Dispatch Health can treat most non-life-threatening emergencies.
They can do the x-rays, they can do stitches.
Urinary tract infections, blood test, urinalysis, ultrasound.
It's almost everything that they can do at the ER.
You never feel rushed. They're there for you and only you.
I felt like their only patient.
And it costs no more than a trip to urgent care because Dispatch Health is covered by most insurance, including Medicare. See if we serve your home at dispatchhealth.com.
Dispatch Health really went above and beyond.
It's wonderful to have care come to your home.
House calls are back, and they're better than ever. Learn more at dispatchhealth.com.